Do you have a donor management tool, or are you using QuickBooks Online to house it all? That's the question that we're answering today. Now, I do not use QuickBooks Online as a donor management tool, and today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into why. So let's get started. So first things first, there is a difference between a CRM or a donor management tool and accounting software, right? So that's the first thing. We need to understand that these two are not one and the same. Now you need to think about your organization and how you are mainly funded and whether or not you even need a donor management tool. Now, if you are an organization that you get a significant influx of individual donations, you need to do things that other organizations who, let's say, are mainly grant funded don't need to do, right? You have to track the specific details around the donors that are giving to your organization. And because you need to track this specific information, a separate donor management tool is going to be best for you. Not to mention, we also need to think about data and privacy concerns and also creating separation among managing financial data and information and then managing personally identifiable information that in some cases need to be kept confidential. So when I think about the differences in what you are managing in your donor database versus what you're managing in QuickBooks Online, you want to think about it like this. In QuickBooks Online, this is where the income is being tracked, right? That money that's coming in, the fees that are associated with the money coming in, it's housed in QuickBooks Online. When you think about your donor management tool, this is where the details around the donor is housed. And a little later, we'll talk about some of the other things that you're able to do with a donor management tool that you can't do with QuickBooks Online, and that being the reason why you also want to keep that separate. Now, the hope is that whatever donor management tool that you do use, that it speaks to QuickBooks, because this also supports the idea that you are creating a process in an organization that has seamless data flow. However, it is very important to make sure that certain details are housed in the correct place and then access to those details is set up correctly. So for example, your accountant that is doing all of the tracking of your income and your donations and your fees and all of that, they may not necessarily need access to your donor database, right? Maybe you're providing reports for them to make sure that at the end of the month things reconcile. Again, it really depends on your team setup, right? And who's a part of your team, how many members, when you start thinking about like segregation of duties. However, it is important to think about, right? Because in your donor management tool, there's going to be a lot more information surrounding your donor. In some cases, you have donors that want to be kept anonymous, right? And so you have to think about all of these things when you're considering housing your donor details in like the accounting software versus a software that was created to manage donor information. Another reason why I don't particularly like managing donor information in QuickBooks is because the integration at times can be a little bit clunky depending on the software, right? But also if we are not the ones, and by we, I mean like the accounting team at Visionary, if we aren't the ones that initially set up the integration, a lot of times when it comes over to us, it's not done correctly, right? And so then you're having duplication of efforts, duplication of information. You may even have like a difference in mapping, which does matter. And so if it is not set up correctly, typically from the beginning, it does require a lot of cleanup and reconciling to make sure that the data in your accounting software is correct and that it maps back correctly to the donor management tool. And so when you think about integrations, right, it is important. You want your tools to speak to each other, but if you are unaware of how to integrate or how to set up that mapping and how to make sure it's done correctly, you may want to hold off on doing that and hire someone who can implement it for you. Now, the final reason that we like to keep the two separate is because if you are heavily funded by individual donations, a lot of times your fundraising or your giving campaigns are centered around these people and getting them to give, right? Are centered around specific information around these donors. There are things that a good donor management tool can do, like planning a campaign, flagging certain donors, right? Hiding certain information. These types of things that you're not going to be able to do with QuickBooks Online because it wasn't designed to manage donors, if that makes sense. And so while you may add a donor's name, let's say, we even do it on the payable side, right? You add the vendor who you paid, right? But sometimes that level of detail that you're looking for from the donor side, you're not gonna get all of that from QuickBooks Online. You're not running campaigns from QuickBooks Online. And so when you think about the nature of your organization and your organization's operations, if you really are heavily invested in individual donors, if that's how you get a lot of your funding, then you absolutely want to separate it from the accounting software and how you manage your finances. Now, this was quick and dirty, straight to the point, because to be honest, I don't recommend merging the two, especially if you are, again, heavily funded by individual donors, where you do need to track that individual donor information. Now, if you want me to dive into the details about different donor management tools, which one might be best, then leave a comment below and let me know. Other than that, I hope that this video was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.